Gold is no match for all Europe.
All Europe?
Yes, if those French and Germans stop cutting each other's throats, what's to stop them cutting ours?
Charles Laughton was an amazing actor. One of those British actors who went to Hollywood who had so much more acting ability than your average Hollywood star.
My lord, I have the most serious objection to this witness being summoned by the prosecution.
Absolutely, unquestionably one of the greatest actors of his generation.
Whilst I'm in charge here, regulations, good, bad, or indifferent, must be carried out to the letter.
He was one of the pioneers of naturalistic acting on film.
This is not what I've a right to expect from you, Will.
Acting against Charles Laughton was an extraordinary thing, really.
Charles Laughton was born in 1899 in Scarborough on the Yorkshire coast to a Catholic family. He had a strict upbringing, being educated in the Jesuit school Stonyhurst. During World War I, he enlisted as a private and fought on the Western Front. There, days before armistice, he was gassed and sent home. His experiences in the war would stay with him for the rest of his life. After the war, he returned to his family. His parents were hotel owners, and his father wanted him to take on the family business. But Charles longed for the escapism of acting, and so, with his family's blessing, he enrolled at RADA.
He does very well at RADA. He's taught by Claude Rains, the legendary Claude Rains. And when he leaves, he starts working in London theatre quite rapidly.
He did it in quite a serious manner. This wasn't sort of a little bit of rep. This was Molière, this was Chekhov, this was Shakespeare. This was getting the full grounding.
He was always completely different to the other actors. He really was rather corpulent and people would say plain, to be nice to him, really. But he had a great distinction about his acting.
He didn't have, I suppose, what you would call an actor's face or body. He was rotund. He was kind of built for kind of the character parts rather than that. But what he did develop over those years was one of the most extraordinary voices I think cinema has ever had. He could change from sort of purring like a cat or to something slippery and evil into something raging like a river. He had this extraordinary versatility within his voice that you expect was developed in that era.
He was getting regular work on the stage. The film industry, of course, was in its infancy at that stage, and they were looking for actors, and the first place they looked was the stage. And he was noticed, and he was brought into the silent films. In fact, he made his first appearance on screen in a silent film called Piccadilly. It's uncredited, in fact. I mean, you can tell from the word go that he knows exactly what to do on camera to make you look at him and to make you look at him alone.
It was at this stage, while he was working in these kind of early British films, that he met his wife-to-be, Elsa Lancaster. And it would become a lifelong romance, a lifelong marriage. So she was a hugely important figure in his life, many times co-star. While he was beginning his movie career at this stage, he was very much an established theatre actor. So it wasn't like he was an unknown at all. And in fact, he'd actually, at that time, gone to Broadway and made pretty much a big name for himself. So it was quite unsurprising in a sense that Paramount would come looking for him, even though he hadn't done very many films.
Sempter, have you ever felt sick to death and tired? Tired of being alive?
No, sir. I can't say that I have.
You're a lucky man. I often have. I do now.
The Devil in the Deep is an early Paramount film with an astonishing cast. It's not only Tallulah Bankhead, it's Gary Cooper, it's Cary Grant, and it's Charles Laughton.
He got really the best reviews in the film. It was quite a successful film, but everybody noticed this new man who was completely distinctive, completely unusual, totally unlike your usual Hollywood star, but a really distinctive actor.
Have you got some crazy suspicions again? Have you? Answer me!
What would you like me to tell you?
You've got something in your mind. You know you have. What are you going to do?
I'm going down to headquarters, and from there I shall go aboard.
You're not going to treat Semple as you did Jekyll, are you?
No, I'm not going to do that.
Well, what are you going to do?
My dear, you wouldn't like me to spoil the suspense by telling you that, would you?
It's a great sort of sense of, you know, Charles Laughton's kind of furious jealousies rising to the surface. That wonderful sort of pantomime villain he could play. Also a bit lascivious in how he delivered his lines.
Well, men, there's nothing for us to do except just wait.
And they thought they could build him into a character actor. Of course, he was much more than a character actor, but that was Hollywood's idea at first, to put him into films where he could usually be a rather nasty man.
This is your first dive, too, isn't it, Carlson?
Yes, sir.
Bad luck. Still, cheer up. We're not dead yet.
And he did those sort of parts very well, but he could also do almost anything, and he proved that later on.
In the same year, he also made If I Had a Million, which is a sort of portmanteau film.
It has an overarching storyline about an extremely wealthy man who decides that as he's dying, he's going to distribute his estate amongst a group of 8 complete strangers. In this, all of the different strangers' storylines are directed by different directors.
And Charles Laughton stars in this beautifully modulated joke, basically, in one film. It's directed by the wonderful Ernst Lubitsch. And all it is terrible stuffy bank. He's kind of inherited his $1 million. Really gets up from his desk and starts to walk up the stairs.
Come in. Mr. Brown? Yes?
Once again, the critics noted him above most other people, and it was one of the few portmanteau films that was successful at the box office.
Lo, the blaze aspires.
In 1932, Charles Laughton made his debut in the world of Hollywood epics as the pampered and petulant Emperor Nero in The Sign of the Cross.
Nero, go away, Titulanus. Fire is spreading. Look at this. I was an excellent voice, too. The fire. I dare remind you. The fire is growing. The fire? I'd hoped it would. Rome will be destroyed when I die. Why not while I live and can see it? And enjoy it.
Sign of the Cross was a huge biblical epic, absolutely monstrously successful. It was the biggest grossing film of the year. Charles Laughton was cast as the Emperor Nero, and I have to say he absolutely luxuriates in his decadence.
He's recruited for the film by Cecil B. DeMille, who had seen him on stage in London and already marked him out as a talent and someone to watch.
It's a wonderful chance for Laughton to do what he did so well for epics. It was just fill the space. He understood, I think, that there was a certain texture to that kind of film where subtlety wasn't going to run very well. And you've just got to embrace it. And he did that kind of exuberant historical villainy better than no one else.
He plays Nero as a kind of effete, giggling, strange, thumb-sucking character, very much the opposite of what Cecil B. DeMille imagined. But he was so convincing his performance that he not only got away with it, but he was able to demand an astonishing fee for the Times.
If only she weren't a Christian. Marcus, if she would publicly renounce her faith.
Not even then.
If she renounced, then justice can be merciful. I can't stay any longer, Marcus. But Caesar, she will not renounce. Then she dies. Hear me. Have a little consideration. Would you have me late for the games? Caesar! Cromwell, if England was as rich as Portugal, as big as Spain, you might be right. But this little island of 3 million souls is no match for all Europe.
All Europe?
Yes, if those French and Germans stop cutting each other's throats, what's to stop them cutting ours?
Where is diplomacy, sir?
Diplomacy, me foot. I'm an Englishman. I can't say one thing and mean another.
What I can do is to build ships, and then more ships.
You mean double the fleet?
Triple it. Fortified over. Rule the sea.
To do this will cost us money, sire.
To leave it undone will cost us England.
One of the films for which Charles Laughton will always be remembered is Alexander Corder's The Private Life of Henry VIII.
This was made for a budget of £60,000. So you can imagine going from the sort of extravagant, sort of flamboyant budgets down to this. The success of this film relies entirely upon Laughton's characterization of Henry VIII, which is unbelievably detailed.
He shapes the film version of Henry VIII, if you like. He's the guy who gives Henry that bluff on-screen characteristic that we recognise now as being in every single portrayal of him, effectively.
Call this a caper? Look at that. All sauce and no substance. Like one of Cromwell's speeches. Just as difficult to swallow.
It was an extraordinary performance. He brought all his guile to it. And this huge, crumpled figure eating his heart out at the dinner table, it's an unforgettable image.
I think it's easily the definitive Henry VIII, but also a signal of how great an actor he was. And I mean great in the sense of he made films what they were. You know, it's not just what a wonderful performer, what a subtle and realistic performance he gave. He gave that film its kind of energy. It was like a special effect. You know, it's kind of, that film is Charles Laughton, and you go there for that kind of thing. And it was just extraordinary.
It was a portrait that you had some sympathy for the king, but at the same time you were also frightened to death of him, because I think Laughton was able to put the king's vulnerability on display, but also his terrifying power.
He was nominated for and won an Oscar for Best Actor, and that was the first time a non-Hollywood film had won any Oscars.
You know, the Germans offered me half of France if I joined them. And the French offered me Flanders. They're very generous with each other's territory. In my youth, in Wolsey's time, I'd have accepted one after the other, but what's the use of new territories and wars again? If those French and Germans don't stop killing each other, the whole of Europe will be in ruins. I want to compel them to keep peace, peace, peace.
By 1933, Charles Laughton is a major star. He's won an Academy Award. He's become, you know, the great character actor, but also, you know, against the odds, because he doesn't look like a leading man, but he was a major leading man of that time.
Starring opposite Frederick March, Laughton gave an unforgettable performance as Inspector Javert in Les Miserables.
Monsieur Madeleine? You are Monsieur Madeleine. My name is Javert. I am the new Inspector of Police assigned to this district. I arrived tonight, but would not intrude upon the festivities. At the same time, I thought it my duty to introduce myself at the first opportunity.
You wish to see me?
Only to report for duty to the new mayor and pay my respects.
So many of Laughton's historical dramas are the definitive ones. You know, that's what he kind of gave.
He damps everything down. He actually is completely under control. He seems like, for much of the film, a very reasonable man.
I've always said to myself, yes, you're hard, you're ruthless when you're in the right, but look out, one day you yourself will trip. Then will you be just? Well, I swore I would. That time's arrived, Monsieur Madeleine. I've caught myself, I have committed a crime. What I've always demanded for others, the law, good or bad, but the law to the letter, I now demand for myself.
I make no charge against you.
You must. If you don't, then I must.
That, actually, of course, that kind of performance only enhances his obsession.
It's what you get from Laughton right from the beginning is the drive of that character, that kind of psychotic need to catch his quarry. What it gives you is the kind of gravity, the kind of pull of this great chase that runs throughout the film.
He was now a major star, People wanted Charles Laughton in almost every film, especially if there was some character in that film who needed his sort of charismatic performances.
Laughton played his most vicious villain to date as Captain Bligh in Mutiny on the Bounty.
What does it mean, sir, flogging through the fleet? Sentence of court-martial, 24 lashes at each ship of the fleet. Well, what was the man's crime, sir? Struck his captain. But that's over 300 lashes. I don't understand why...
Can you understand this, Mr. Byam? Discipline's the thing. A seaman's a seaman, a captain's a captain, and a midshipman, Sir Joseph or no Sir Joseph, is the lowest form of animal life in the British Navy.
1935 is a signal year for Charles Laughton. He'd made Les Miserables, he made Mutiny on the Bounty, two films that were both nominated for Best Picture that year, and really defined him as, you know, the great sort of molten villain of the moment.
It is the role that probably he was sort of waiting to play. All the other roles were sort of leading up to this. It could have been tailor-made for him. He makes you think that anyway.
Charles Laughton plays Captain Bligh with amazing panache. His scenes of flogging and torture they would be excessive in any other actor's hands, but he manages to keep you with him in these scenes of immense brutality.
You there! Who did that?
I can't tell you, sir.
Mr. Morrison? Aye, sir. Fought that man for 24 lashes?
I done it, sir.
Pick it up. Put it back. Mr. Morrison, lay on with a will.
Aye, aye, sir.
Like he was a definitive Javert, like he's the definitive Nero, like he's the definitive Henry VIII, he is the definitive Captain Bligh. Filling it, you know, with kind of bluster and fire and a kind of English pompousness that the role really needs.
He can go as far as he can in terms of being tough, tyrannical, and yet you never lose sight of the fact that he has to do what he has to do.
Clark Gable plays Mr. Christian. The two didn't get on in real life, and that probably helps the performance because they hate each other on the screen as well. So you can feel a real tension between these two actors.
Many of the Hollywood stars who played with him recognized him as a better actor than they were. And Clark Gable was a bit worried that he was going to hog the screen and make it difficult for Clark Gable to make his mark. It's precisely what happened if you look at the film now. It's Bligh you look at, not Clark Gable.
He was kind of edgy and angry and quite sort of intense the whole way through. And that kind of friction sort of plays out beautifully. And obviously, you know, carried on right the way through to the Oscars because they were both nominated as Best Actor. So that kind of rivalry between them sort of carried on beyond the kind of borders of the screen.
He played again for Alexander Korda in Rembrandt when he played the painter himself.
You mustn't be frightened if I look at you. I'm not looking at you as a man looks. A painter. Painters have a different way of looking at things. You must imagine that I'm looking at you in the same way as the water with which you wash yourself, or the air you move in, or the light that shines on you. That sees you, you know, all the time, even when you're quite alone.
Rembrandt is one of the definitive portraits of an artist on film.
Rembrandt saw Charles Laughton reunited with Alexander Korda in a very sensitive, moving biopic of the Dutch painter. It's a really interesting performance from Laughton because his naturalism and his excess have always been in conflict as a performer previously, and this is where he gives a very nuanced, very mournful, very touching performance.
Rembrandt is a relief in some ways because it's a chance to look again at Laughton as an actor who's not got to be the big, charismatic villain. He can be someone far subtler and more interesting and more kind of introspective.
Good day, Smuts. I came out without any money. I needed half a florin. Would you lend it to me?
Half a florin in cash?
It isn't much good to me in sugar or cloves.
Well, that reminds me, Rembrandt, you owe me rather a large bill for sugar and cloves.
You frightened you're not going to get your money back?
Oh, I didn't say so, Rembrandt.
Are you going to lend it to me or not?
Well, you were a good customer once.
I should say I was. I put it on the bill. And don't forget to send in your account on quarter day. Good day.
Good day. donate half a florin to charity.
Actually trying to do those biopics of painters is really, really difficult because invariably they don't look authentic. For some reason, something to do with the way Korda directs it, something to do with the way Laughton actually inhabits the role, he is Rembrandt.
I think it stands as a real emblem of the other Charles Laughton, the one we didn't get enough of, that, you know, he was kind of interested in playing softness. And he clearly was, you know, quite an intellectual man because he understood these characters very well. So he gets over the kind of the torment of the artist very well.
You're an old king, and you've had all the women you want. What's more, the evil spirit has entered into you.
Has it? What's that?
You never heard the story of King...
You're a lost sheep, if ever I saw one. Going to pieces under that cocky hat of yours like a rotten tub. If you ever had a backbone, it's all been dissolved in booze. Well, I'm sick and tired of your drunken labradors. And I... Oh. Here, you come up to my house tonight and have half a dozen bottles of...
I accept your apology.
I beg your pardon.
It's all right. See you tonight for the beer. Hey, I suppose we'll be having company.
Oh, you do. Here, that way.
It's an intriguing take by Laughton. He plays this dissolute beachcomber who is up to tiny bits of nefarious, no good drinking and alcoholic behavior. And it's how a woman tries to force him to see the error of his ways. The woman who tries to reform Laughton's beachcomber, Martha, is played by his wife, Elsa Lancaster. So she's chasing him around these islands, trying to get him to behave himself.
And, Mr. Wilson, you have an even greater friend.
Don't you bring up that controleur to me.
I was not speaking of the controleur, I was speaking of God.
So it's all this kind of friction, giving this lovely sense of a real marriage somewhere in the background of these two roles. And slowly but surely, over the film, they will come to sort of trust and love one another in a way that's kind of forbidden to them.
It's very beautifully shot. It's got hints of German expressionism in it, and it was clearly very influential on the way that Laughton thought about filmmaking.
The next film that came out of Mayflower Pictures was actually probably their most interesting. It's called Sidewalks of London.
An ugly knife lay buried in the heart of Ned Carew! 'Twas the vengeance of the little yellow god. Ladies and gentlemen, I must ask you to excuse this slight fracas. I do not stand here for my own enjoyment, so I will ask my friend Gentry here to collect any small tribute you may feel inclined to bestow. A golden sovereign being out of the question these cruel hard times, 2 pence will be always acceptable. Thank you.
Charles Laughton plays a guy on the streets of London with a small group of buskers who are playing and performing, and they bump into Vivian Leigh while she's on the run from Rex Harrison. So that cast is an astonishing cast, I mean, the word go.
It's got an almost documentary realism to it. And it shows an insight into St Martin's Lane and that whole area of London at that particular time, which is very, very rarely seen. It's got a fabulous sense of camaraderie on the streets. It's got a real sense of London bustling theatrical life.
You let me through.
It really is a kind of tragic love story in which he obviously has fallen in love with her, and she gets sucked, she gets found and discovered and sort of betrays him for Rex Harrison's big sort of theatrical impresario. As a little Star is Born as well as part of it, and he is left behind as she becomes a superstar.
We got to have a talk.
I'll talk to you in the morning.
It is morning.
You clear out, see? You're drunk.
I ain't drunk. And I'll clear out when I know you've been.
I've only been with Mr. Prentice. I'm sorry you sat up, really I am. But he asked me to his party and I thought, well, I'd...
Yes, you try another.
What you mean?
Party me eye. Party at 2.
You say that to me again, I'll smack your face.
Libby, are you telling me the truth?
Why, old Charles, of course.
What carries it is Laughton's sense of heartbreak. It's in his face. You know, while he could be sneery and sort of villainous and almost a bit sort of lascivious and evil, at the same time, he could be tremendously sympathetic.
Jamaica Inn, Mayflower's next film, Charles Laughton and Alfred Hitchcock worked together, but it was not a hugely successful partnership.
Come to complain. I want my rights. Your rights? I don't listen to that sort of talk. I have the law on my side. You haven't. I'm the law here in Pengallen, and you haven't me on your side and won't have while you take that turn. Next thing you'll be telling me you're as good as I am. I'm a man, same as you. Put that out of your head, my friend, before it lands you in the hulks. You're not as good as I am and never will be. Nature was against it from the start, and everything else has been against it since. I'm a gentleman. Oh, you great... Have him run out, Davis. Don't give him 24 hours.
It's not one of Hitchcock's finest works. He himself did not enjoy it. He didn't get on very well with Laughton. He felt it was a kind of Laughton production in many ways, and he felt there was a lot of Laughton's kind of men around it that I think he felt had too much sway in what was going on. I think from Hitchcock's side, he was already halfway to California.
It's a strong performance by Laughton. It's not Hitchcock's best film, and perhaps because, in a sense, Laughton, to some degree, takes control of the movie. He makes himself shine in the film, so it's great to watch him do that.
I suppose the film that the public most remember him by, if it's not his performance as Henry VIII, it's his performance as Quasimodo in The Hunchback of Notre Dame.
It wasn't her! If you want to know who it was me.
Hunchback of Notre Dame has been filmed many times. This is, without doubt, the racist version.
He plays a very nuanced, sympathetic, beautiful performance as Quasimodo, a character who's often drawn as a ludicrous villain, you know, screaming Esmeralda from the bells.
I don't think anyone's captured that role like he has. And he didn't make it silly either. I think that's what's lovely about the whole film, is that, you know, he played the character, and that's what's important. It's a literary character, the Hunchback. He's not a fool.
I never realized till now how ugly I am. And because you're so beautiful. I'm not a man. I'm not a beast.
The makeup is quite extraordinary for its day. Apparently, you know, as they developed it before the film, Laughton was just a nightmare. You know, the poor makeup artist went through hundreds of different concoctions. Laughton just wouldn't have it until they finally got to the kind of great bulbous eye and the kind of, it comes down, the great hunch, of course.
If he wasn't a beautiful man anyway, it made him look as ugly as sin. But he transcended that with an extraordinary performance.
Weirdly enough, because of the way Charles Laughton looked, he was never going to play the romantic hero in any film. This is as close as he got to it. And it did it by actually becoming uglier and darker. It's an absolutely wonderful film, and it stands the test of time perfectly.
At the moment they were on set with the cameras rolling, the Second World War broke out. And Laughton said that he felt that he was ringing the bell for everybody, saying, you know, out, the time's come, you need to get ready for this huge war. And he said that's what I was channeling when I was shooting that scene.
Then Latour's version of what took place is completely untrue.
In 1947, Charles Laughton reunited with Alfred Hitchcock for The Paradigm Case.
The form was objectionable, and I'm anxious not to intervene again, Mr. Keene. Am I being clear?
Your lordship always makes his meanings perfectly clear.
Then kindly attend to my ruling, and do not let me have further cause to repeat it.
I hope I shall always take note of the ruling of a learned judge, however much I may disagree with it.
Do not bandy words with me, Mr. Keene. Kindly go on with your examination of the witness.
The Paradigm Case is a film by Alfred Hitchcock with Charles Laughton in. Now, that in and of itself, given their previous history, would show that Hitchcock thought that Laughton had something incredibly valuable to bring to the role, despite the fact the two had clashed earlier in their careers.
I think why Laughton is in it is because Hitchcock knew he was the perfect guy to play a judge, and he is the perfect judge. He presides over this court like Henry VIII and delivers these wonderful speeches about the nature of the law. In a kind of a list of many definitives, there's another one to add to the list. Charles Laughton is cinema's definitive judge.
He played with Gregory Peck, for one, who was one of the best actors in Hollywood, one of the most notable stars. They got on very well together. Everybody was enormously enthralled with Charles Laughton because he was such an unusual and subtle actor. People felt, my God, I've got to be good now. I'm playing against Charles Laughton. Didn't always work because he was so much better than they were.
How dare you speak to one of His Majesty's judges like that, you silly woman? The jury decides questions of guilt or innocence.
I may be silly, Tommy, but I love you. I've always loved you. And you must have known for years how terrible it is to love a man who... Oh, Tommy, when you were young, you were kind. You can't sit on that bench and...
As long as I sit on that bench, my dear Sophie, I shall continue to do my duty. And I have performed a duty today. The Paradine woman will be hanged after 3 o'clock.
Look at her, ladies. Your future Queen Elizabeth.
Just like her father.
There's a filly for you, huh? There's breeding, huh? No mistaking the fatherhood.
But Henry, didn't I have a hand in it?
Yes, but I gave you the idea.
He played in Young Bess as Henry VIII again, with Gene Simmons and Deborah Kerr.
It really rests on two things. It rests on a wonderful performance from Simmons, capturing the kind of feminist fire that Elizabeth is and had, and how she became the monarch, and all the things she overcame. And also, it was just a reminder of Laughton's wonder with that character and his enjoyment of that character. And he's bigger, the girth has got wider now, and he just sort of seems to fill the screen sort of wider as it possibly goes.
He flips between these intense raging Henry VIII into a great big guffawing Henry VIII. It's a very broad physical role.
I did see the ships for a moment. Now they're gone. Perhaps they saw us and sailed away.
Take that brat away. Off with you. Out of my sight.
No.
Go, my Lady Elizabeth. You go back to Hatfield tomorrow and stay there till the end of your days. I don't ever want to see your face again.
I'll not go back to Hatfield.
What's it?
I said I'll not go back to Hatfield.
What?
Sail ho! On the port beam!
What do you make of it?
Ships of the line! French by the rig! 9, 10 sails!
Hobson's Choice is a David Lean film. He had seen Charles Laughton in Wolves, Laughton's first ever film, and decided that is the man for me. He'd borne that performance in mind throughout his career. When he was in charge of the camera, he got him on board.
Listen to me, you three. Providence has decreed that you should lack a mother's hand at the time when single girls grow bumptious and must have somebody to rule. I'll tell you this, you'll not rule me.
You're not addressing a Masons meeting now, Father?
No, at the moment I'm addressing a few remarks to the rebellious females of this household. What I say will be listened to and heeded. There's been a gradual increase of uppishness towards me. I've come to a decision about you two. You're going to exercise your gifts on some other man than me.
You mean get married, Father?
Exactly. I'm going to choose husbands for the pair of you.
You mean we can't choose husbands for ourselves?
You're not even fit to choose dresses for yourselves.
For my money, the great Laughton film is Hobson's Choice. It's a film I adore. It's David Lean, but it's David Lean sort of doing what he didn't really do, which was a wonderful sort of working-class British comedy. It's a version of King Lear, of all things, in which the never-better Charles Laughton plays Henry Hobson.
What's his name?
His name? I'll tell you when I've got him.
are counting chickens before they're hatched. Maggie, you're nearly frightened. I never knew an old maid yet that hadn't a husband coming along in a month. I'll admit you gave me a shock when you broke news, but I know it caused you fret myself.
When you look back on some of his films, you do think they're pretty melodramatic. His performances are pretty melodramatic, but at the same time, they were also very subtle in certain ways, and he managed to make this old man into a real character.
In it, you can see Charles Laughton is sort of coming home. He's a man from Scarborough. He'd played the role already at Scarborough Theatre many years ago, early on in his career. His parents were hotel keepers, so he's playing the person he could have grown up to be.
He then goes on to make his debut as a film director with Night of the Hunter.
Leaning on the everlasting love. What a fellowship, what a peace is mine. Leaning on the everlasting.
Don't never sleep.
What a blessedness.
It remains one of the great sort of miracles and mysteries of Hollywood history that Charles Laughton only ever directed one film. Maybe he did everything he could in this one moment, because Night of the Hunter is one of the greats. You know, it's a genuine masterpiece.
He uses tricks from German Expressionism. He uses tricks from the cinema that he was exploring when he was growing up. Probably tricks he also learned thanks to Eric Palmer.
And one day, this king got taken away by some bad men. And before he got took off, he told his son to kill anyone who tried to steal his gold. And before long, the bad men came back and...
It just showed a versatility of mind, a visual sense, a man who clearly had absorbed the lessons of filmmaking along the way to show that, you know, Laughton was a supreme filmmaker as well as he was an actor.
The sad thing is that it was commercially and critically unsuccessful at the time, although, of course, it has now become a huge cult, been reassessed as a very important film.
Ah, little lad, you're staring at my fingers. Would you like me to tell you the little story of right hand, left hand? The story of good and evil? H-A-T-E. It was with this left hand that old brother Cain struck the blow that laid his brother low. L-O-V-E. You see these fingers, dear hearts, these fingers has veins that run straight to the soul of man. The right hand, friends, the hand of love. Now watch and I'll show you the story of life. These fingers, dear hearts, is always a warring and a tugging, one against the other. Now watch 'em. Old brother left hand hates a fighting, and it looks like love's a goner. But wait a minute. Wait a minute. Hot dog loves a winning. Yes, sirree. It's love that won, and old left hand hate is down for the count.
The reception at the time put him off making another film, which I can only say is our loss.
Let me ask you something. Do you believe Leonard Vole is innocent? Do you? Do you?
I'm not sure. Oh, I'm sorry, Wilfred. Of course, I'll do my best.
It's all right, Brother-in-law. I'll take it from here.
I have called Dr. Harrison and given him a complete report on your shocking behavior. I can no longer...
Give me a match, Miss Grimshaw.
Sir Wilfred!
Did you hear me? A match!
Witness for the prosecution is an Agatha Christie story, and Charles Laughton plays a lawyer in this who's involved in a very complicated case about the murder of a man who then appears to show up alive. It's a very fraught and overwrought family drama that's played out in a courtroom.
Laughton actually carries the way all the way through. I mean, he's surrounded by good people, but you can tell that he's a man who's very, very confident in himself. He's the perfect sort of lawyer, and yet even he can't see the truth.
You get the whole kind of mechanics of Agatha Christie at her best, the kind of who can we trust, the very details of the plot, the constant twists that arrive and take us in a new direction. But that all seems a little bit sort of secondary to my mind to Laughton is having great fun.
I was hoping for a loan for my new invention. Just a couple of £100. An honest business proposition, that's all it would have been. Is that so wicked?
You knew it was the housekeeper's day off?
Well, yes, I did.
So you went there because you knew she'd be alone?
No, I went there because I thought she might be lonely.
All right, lonely. You and the rich, lonely widow all alone in that lonely house with a gramophone blaring the Mikado. Perhaps you turned up the volume to drown out her cries.
No, when I left her, she was alive.
When the housekeeper came back, she was dead.
One of the joyous parts is watching Charles Laughton playing with his monocle while he's interrogating witnesses on the stand. It's an enormously fun, uplifting performance, and it earned him another Oscar nomination.
In 1960, Charles Laughton returned to Rome to star alongside Laurence Olivier in Spartacus.
Crassus acted on a point of honor. Patrician honor. No matter how noble this looks from the outside, I don't like the color of it. Crassus is the only man in Rome who hasn't yielded to Republican corruption, and never will. I'll take a little Republican corruption along with a little Republican freedom, but I won't take the dictatorship of Crassus, and no freedom at all. That's what he's out for, and that's why he'll be back.
The great epic, I suppose, at the heart of all of kind of epic cinema remains Spartacus, directed against his better judgment by Stanley Kubrick, and with his kind of fabulous cast: Gene Simmons, Kirk Douglas, Laurence Olivier, and of course Charles Laughton as Gracchus, the kind of noble part of the Senate, the populist, the man who wants to bring democracy to Rome. You know, he's the good guy.
Kubrick was full of compliments for him and thought he was one of the best actors he'd used. And he had the capacity to bring dignity to almost anything.
He's not really part of the main action. And I think that one of the qualities Laughton has is that he doesn't actually have to be part of the main action. He can perform, he can walk into a movie, do his stuff, and then walk out. And all you get is the lingering image of Laughton.
Tomorrow they will learn the cost of their terrible folly, their treason.
And where does my name appear on the list of disloyal enemies of the state?
First.
Is arguably the best part of the film, the kind of rivalries between Olivier and Laughton as these two wonders of the British stage, these two wonders of the idea of British acting, finally getting to kind of confront one another.
Yet upon you, I have no desire for vengeance. Your property shall not be touched. You will retain the rank and title of Roman senator. A house, a farmhouse in Picenum has been provided for your exile. You may take your women with you.
Why am I to be left so conspicuously alive?
Your followers are deluded enough to trust you. I intend that you shall speak to them tomorrow for the sake of their own good, their peaceful and profitable future.
He played with Henry Fonda and Gene Tierney in Advise and Consent, which is another big success.
Mr. President, I feel I must defend my distinguished colleague from Illinois. It appears that he is beset on every side by snarling enemies, yet it was his intention only to give voice to the simple complaint many of us feel on both sides of the aisle. An honest revulsion. At this nomination, the president has thrown in our teeth.
Mr. President, will this senator yield?
I will not yield, sir, but I will say for you what should say anyway, that this is not the time for personal imputations. Will that satisfy the senator?
We get the great Charles Laughton as Senator Seabright Cooley, a wonderful name. But again, it just plays in that wonderful kind of intelligent delivery that he has, the kind of teasing, purring quality of a man who knows better, but hasn't yet said so.
The president of the party and I would take it as a favor if you'd lay off.
I honor the president, I love my party, and I admire you, Mr. Majority Leader, except where it crosses with my convictions.
Advise and Consent is Charles Laughton's final movie. While he was filming it, he was battling cancer, and he died 6 months after the film was completed.
What's the matter, old spoil sport?
Charles Laughton brought a real presence, bearing and acting talent to those early roles.
He's a filmmaker's dream because, you know, he gives you the drama, you know. He gives the audience someone to hiss at. He gives you something kind of quite textured as well, you know. You kind of sympathise a little bit. You understand him.
Very kind of you, sir.
He was a big, big star in the cinema, and one whom it's impossible to forget. There's no one like him now, and there never will be.
Aye.
Tina Turner and the Eurythmics, Thompson Twins and U2. Back to 1983 in the new series of From the Vaults. Elbow's Guy Garvey has come up with loads more musical treasures. Watch them all whenever you like, on demand from Sky Arts.